Hey guys, and welcome to the first in my 20-minute terrain projects playlist, in which I'll teach you some quick projects to make terrain for your tabletop gaming table, mostly from stuff you'll have lying around. Today we'll be making these easy apocalypse wasteland barriers. I think wasteland terrain is a really great place to start if you're new to making terrain, because you can't really mess it up. It is, after all, made from rubble and trash, from piled up stones and anything the wastelanders could find. So all of these pieces are made using the same basic method, which I'm going to show you now. First, cut yourself some MDF or plasticard bases, a bit bigger than the thing you're planning to make. Bevel the edges and use rough lines for realism. For the wall sections, I tried to make the edges butt up a little so that they could be joined together. Next, use some DAS modelling clay very roughly to build up a central rubble pile. This helps to add form to the overall structure, as well as giving us a base to stick stuff into. On this model here, I didn't actually do this, so it's not essential, but I do find it makes things easier and looks a bit better, I think, but obviously completely up to you. Work with what you've got. Next up, grab some old sprues, preferably ones that are mostly straight rather than weird gene stealer shapes. Cut out some large pieces to use as structural foundations for your buildings. To build the underlying structure, if you're building something with ramparts for guys to stand on rather than just a wall, then I find corners with a bit sticking off like this quite cool. You can then lay bits between them for use as platforms. So point these outwards, then fill in the gaps with straight ones. Honestly though, don't worry too much about being exact. For these straight wall sections, I just jammed them lengthways in. While you're at it, cut spikes out of any other little pieces of sprue left over. Stick those on the outside of the wall if you like that aesthetic. You can always dress them up with skulls later or something else. Then you're going to need lots of closely corrugated cardboard. You'll find this everywhere in packaging, but you may need to try a few different pieces before you find the type of card with weak glue that means you can easily pull one side of it off. So always keep an eye out for bits of trash you can use. To make corrugated metal sheeting, I like to cut it up into lengthwise strips, cut those down into smaller rectangles, then just rough them up. How much you rough them up is really up to you, but I usually go quite strong first by ripping sides out with some pliers, then adding bullet and shrapnel holes by smashing them with a pair of scissors. Maybe make some of the holes larger. Again, don't think too much about it, just mash them, go randomly, do a few at a time or more. At this point, I also like to add a strip of fabric mesh maybe. This stuff is so cheap. When dry brushed silver, it looks quite nice, like an old chain link fence, I think. You can either add scraps here and there or just run a length down, and we'll be covering most of it up anyway. It's just to add a bit of visual interest in the dead spaces. Next, I use lashings of PVA glue to fix a layer of corrugated sheeting to the core structure. If you haven't got time to wait, use super glue, but really patience is the key here. Next up, I use another thick layer of PVA on the base and here and there to add big bits of grit and then finer sand, whatever goes really. At this point, I also like to tidy things up a bit. Cut off some of the sheets that you no longer need, maybe consider closing off some of the top areas with another thin layer, cutting off some of the extra sprues you might not want, just generally tidying it up and neatening it up a bit. You might also want to dress things up with bits and bobs you might have, oil barrels, perhaps some skulls, dead space marines, that sort of thing, maybe some tyre stacks. Lastly, on the construction side, fix everything down with a light spraying of heavily watered down PVA glue again. Now, I'm by no means a pro painter, and this video is more on the construction side of things, but personally I like to paint the structural elements and spikes a bit of a dull metal dry brush, same with the corrugated metal sheeting. Obviously that comes in different colours, maybe you want one that's mostly green, but whatever, up to you. Then I'll corrode it with some Typhus Corrosion. I know GW paints are expensive, but I don't know of a suitable alternative. Then just add a bit of orange rust on the worst of the corrosion and you're basically done. Depending on what board you'll be putting this on, you might want to paint the ground a sandy yellow first. Personally, I like the more ashen, decayed urban feel, and it's super easy to do with progressively lighter dry brushes of grey and finally a bit of white. I might even then go in and snow it up a bit, so it all fits in with my favourite Space Wolves army. So that's it for this 20-minute terrain tutorial. You should be able to get at least one structure or wall built in 20 minutes. Work on it for a day, you'll have an entire outpost. So please hit like if you appreciated this video, that tells YouTube to rank it a bit better. And consider subscribing to Tabletop Dungeons for more terrain making tutorials, board game reviews, and maybe some battle report. Thanks for watching.